Okay. So our Daf Yomi sponsors for the month are Mr. and Mrs. Moshe and Susie Fetter. The Ilui Nishmas, Mrs. Fetter's father, Simcha Arya ben Yosef Tzvi, whose yard site is on the 17th day of Iyar. Neshama of an Aliyah. Sunday's Daf, that's today's Daf, is Josh and Chana Bernstein. The Ilui Nishmas got Josh's grandfather, Mr. Eugene Eisenberg, Yaakov ben Binyamin, whose yard site was on the 8th of Iyar, is going to be on the 8th of, or was on the 8th of Iyar. His neshama should have an aliyah. Okay, so we're holding Tes Zayin Amud Beis towards the last, I would say, third of the daf, which starts with Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Amar Luhulahani Kroi, Amar Luhulahani Kroi Vigani. So Rabbi Yeshua Levi would read these psukim. Which psukim did he read? The psukim of, it's called Shir Shel Pegoim. It's a song of Pegoim is, how do you translate that? That's things that are, what? No. It's threatening forces, threatening, okay, so what did he used to say? He used to say that Tehillim that we spoke about before, Yoishe B'Seiser Elyon, B'Tzel Shaddai. We say that by the koilel and after every davening, okay?
Really?
Yeah, as part of Tehillim for Eretz Yisrael. So that's called Shir Shel Begoim because it talks about how there are these forces that are trying to hurt us, spiritual forces, and that we ask Hashem to protect us from those forces. So he used to read that kapitel Tehillim, and then Vigana, he would go to sleep. So the Gemara asks, Vehechi Avid Hachi, how could he do such a thing? Hamar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi teaches also li'israpois b'divrei Torah b'divrei Torah. You're not allowed to use Torah to heal yourself. In other words, you can't make you can't quote psukim and things like that to heal yourself. It's interesting, right? Yeah, because you don't use Torah. I didn't know the whole sugya, but it sounds to me like you can't. You know, you can't turn Torah into medicine. It's not medicine. It's not there to just be for your own help in that way. We daven for people, but that's not using it as a medicine.
Right. You say
right?
For people. That's not even a medicine either. Tell them.
What? That's not medicine. That's asking for Hashem's help, but actually to say over a kapitel Hilm with Hashem's name, for the purpose of healing. That's what the Gemara means by also lihisrapois. It's Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi means by that. So how then is it that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, the same Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi who said you can't heal yourself through divrei Torah, how did he then read these psukim and go to sleep? I guess he was trying to heal himself overnight or protect himself, whatever. So the Gemara says, Lahagin shiny. It's different when you're coming to ask Hashem. You're using psukim for Hashem to protect you. That's okay, but you can't use psukim to actually heal yourself. Interesting. Does Rashi say anything?
Heal yourself, like we say to heal him for so many people.
Yeah, again, that's not using it as it's not using it as a medicine. It's not using it as a tool. It's using it as that's tefillah. There's a category called tefillah.
Right.
But here you're using it specifically, I want to say this thing in order to heal myself. So Gemara says you can't do that, but you could do it in order to defend yourself from negative spiritual forces in the night. Okay? Yeah, weiter. So, is that Bernstein? Yeah.
That's Bernstein.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's your your grandfather. Your grandfather should have an aliyah and a shaman. Okay, so ve'ela, so the Gemara says, Ki amar asur di'ikamake. Ve'ela, ki amar asur. So the Gemara says, well, hold on a second. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, asur li'israpois. He says it's prohibited. So the Gemara says, is it just asur di'ikamake when there's a makeh? So that's when there's actually a wound. When there's actually a wound. We just said, lahagen is okay, but when there's a wound that you have to heal, that you're prohibited from doing. Is it just aser? Idi kamaka aser v'tu loy, is that it? That's not a loichish alamaka, ein lo chelik lo ein lamaba. It's a lot worse than just aser. It says if one whispers what? Whispers divrei Torah. If you whisper out psukim, on a makkah, ein lo chelek la'olam haba, he has no share in the world to come. It's a lot worse than just usher.
That's pretty hard. That's pretty harsh.
That's harsh. So Gemara says, Ha'it mar lo Rabbi Yochanan b'roikik shanu. No, we're talking about, that's a special thing, ein lo chelek la'olam haba, that's where you spit. What does that mean? Let's see Rashi. He says, Haloichesh beroikek shana. Beroikek v'oimer achar kach loichesh. He would spit and then he would whisper out these psukim. Which psukim are we talking about? So Rashi says above, ein lo chelek haloichesh alamakeh, one who whispers over. I think there's a different word to whisper. Like what do they do? It's called incantate, maybe. Right. To say kol hamachla asher samti b'mitzrayim. He says the following pasuk: any sickness that I shall place in Mitzrayim, okay, I won't put on you. That's the pasuk. Where is that from? From Shevuos. So he says this, and it has Hashem's name on it. I just need the Kleenex over there. I'm gonna.
Allergy,
Yeah, so it has Hashem's name. So what's this guy doing? He's whispering. He first of all spits and then he whispers. So Gemara says,
"Is the spitting that is
yes,
the mice of spitting that makes
spitting is that turns into a whole different level. She'ein maskirin shem shemaim ala rakika, because God forbid a person should never mention Hashem's name over spitting. Okay, and here he's saying Hashem's name because it says in the end of the pasuk, "Ani Hashem rofecha." That same pasuk in Shevuos, I Hashem will heal you.
Right.
Yes, it's like a bizayon. It's a terrible bizayon, terrible, disgraceful thing to do.
But that's not. But it's not a raya because it's the spitting that's the problem. It's not psukim. It's not saying the psukim.
Yeah, but I guess why would a person do it otherwise? Other than I guess that's part of some kind of a weird. I don't know. I'm not used to this kind of refuah, but don't know it. I've never been prescribed it. But in those days, I guess if otherwise, people would probably be very careful not to do it, I suppose. Okay. I don't know why they did. Do anybody have any insight into that? No? What? Really? Okay. Oh, thanks. Okay. Oh, if Rabbi Leuterman were here, he'd know. Okay, fine.
That was a joke. Come on.
Yeah. I understand. Okay. Now, I think the Mishnah back on Yud Gimel Amud Beis says, let's just read it quickly because it says like this. Echad nichnas le'azara ve'echad nichnas le'toisefis ha'azara. So Yudalit Amud Aleph, I'm sorry. Yudalit Amud Aleph, the end of the Mishnah says, a person either who enters into the Azara or enters into the Tosefes Azara. So I guess it's an area that's been added onto the Azara.
Right.
That all of these people, if they're Tameh, all right, we're talking about, the Gemara is talking about the issue of walking into the base of Mikdash when you're Tameh. So it includes both those who enter into the Azara and those who enter into the Tosefes Azara. Now, she'ein moisifin ala ir ve'ala azaras ela b'melech v'navi v'urim v'tumim v'sanhedrin shoshim. We don't add on. That's a funny lashon. She'ein moisifim. Rashi says, okay, all right. We don't add on to the to a city or onto the Azaras and to the courtyards, except through a melech. Having a melech there, a king, a navi, a prophet, Urim v'tumim, Sanhedrin, Shilshivim v'echad, Sanhedrin of 71. The Urim v'tumim, of course, is the special breastplate with the lights. Ubishtei toidos, and 2 loaves of bread of the toida offerings. Ubishir, and with song. Ubeis din mahalchin, and the beis din is walking. Vishtei toidos achareim. That sounds like, right now, it sounds like that means, and the 2 toidos come after the beis din. So first, it sounds like the beis din is walking first. The shtei toidos, the 2 people holding loaves of bread, are walking after them. V'chol Yisrael achareim, and all of Israel after them. Let's just continue the mission. We're going to get to this. Hapnimis ne'acheles, the inner loaf, the loaf on the inside is eaten. It's consumed. V'achitzoyna nisrefes, and the outer one is burnt. We'll see why it gets burnt. And any time it hasn't been done according to this procedure, with all of these, sounds like all of them. You need all of them.
Yeah.
So if you walk into that Tosefes Azara, you're not chayav because it hasn't been sanctified. It hasn't been mikadeshed in the right way.
You walk in Tameh.
Yes. Okay. So what would they do? They would make a procession around the new area. Okay, around the new area. They would go around next to the wall. They would build it into an enclosure, and then enclose it with a wall, and then they would have this procession. All right, to be Mekadesh. Very interesting. That's how they would be Mekadesh, new territory in the city of Jerusalem or in the base of Mikdash, etc. Okay, so let's go back to the Gemara. So Gemara says, based in Mahalchim Shtei Toides Achareim. So the Gemara quotes the Mishnah. The basin would walk, and the Shtei Toides afterwards. So the Gemara says, "Lememra the basin kame toida azlei." Does this seem to imply that the basin would come first in front of the toida? But how can that be? Vaksiv that we have in the pasuk. Now, where do we learn all this from? I think Sefer, is it Ezra? Let's see, pasuk and hey. Let's just see hey. Yeah.
Nehemiah. 12:32.
Oh, that's Ches. Sorry.
Ches. Nehemiah. See above 8:58. No.
Vayelech achareim Hoshaya v'chatzi sarei Yehuda Nehemiah. So and walking after them was Hoshaya and half of the Sarei Yehuda, the officers of the Judean officers. Okay, so that's what it says in the pasuk. So what does it seem to imply? Vayelech achareim, walking after them was Hoshaya. After who? After the ones bearing the two toidas. So the people bearing the toidas were coming first. So Gemara says Hachi Ka'amar. And by the way, what's Sarei Yehuda? It would seem to imply that is the Sanhedrin. Okay, because those are the most hush of people there. All right. So the Gemara says Hachi Ka'amar. No, it's not a kasha. The Mishnah says, you have to read the Mishnah like this. Based in Mahalchim, B'shtei Toidos Mahalchos. No. First the Mishnah is telling you, based in is walking in the parade, and the Shtei Toidos are walking in this parade. Based in Acharehem, but the based in is after them. So you look back in the Mishnah, when it says, based in Mahalchim, B'shtei Toidos Acharehem, Acharehem doesn't go on Shtei Toidos. It's going on, it's first of all, based in Mahalchim, Vishtei Toidos. Based in is going, and the Shtei Toidos, and then you have to say, okay, and Achareim is the based in. Okay. Keitzad Mahalchos. How do they go? So how do the two Toidos? So they're walking. So how are they positioned? So Rabbi Chia, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi. You have a Machloikis, Rabbi Chia, Rabbi Shimon. Chad Amar Zu Keneged Zu, V'chad Amar Zu Achar Zu. One of them says they're going parallel. One is next to each other. The other one says one is in front of the other. Mando Amar Zu Keneged Zu, the one who says that they're walking in parallel. Hapenimis is Hachna Mekar L'choima. The inner one, the one that we know is going to be eaten, right, is, we said the pnimis was eaten, right? Is that what we said earlier? The pnimis is eaten and the chitzoin is burnt, right? Yeah. So we said the inner one is the one that's closer to the wall. Remember, they're walking next to the wall. So if you have two parallel ones, the one on the inside is called the pnimis, right? Man da'amar zu achar zu. But if you learn that it means the one in front of the other, hapnimis achda mekarvela bastin. So we already said bastin is walking after the two doides. So the one that is first, there's one, and then there's two. That one is called the pnimis, the one that's closer to the bastin. It's not. The Mishnah says hapnimis nachelas v'chitzoyna nisrafes. The inner one is consumed, it's eaten. Achitzoyna nisrafes. So let's understand. Bishlam lamando amar zu achar zu. So I can understand, according to the one who says zu achar zu, the one there's one in front, the one behind it. So therefore, the inner one is consumed. Why? Because the first one is coming, and it's mekadesh the azara. It's mekadesh the azara. So the second one is already, when it's walking, it's in sanctified territory. The first one, though, is kind of like ambiguous. Like it's kind of like, it's like a pioneer. It's a pioneer toda, and it's like it's taking unsanctified land and making it sanctified. But in that process, it's kind of like touching up against unsanctified and becomes, it's yoitze a little bit, right? It's like, the psul of yoitze is when anything, the kodesh, goes outside of the precinct in which it can be eaten. So therefore, that's a pus, it's a psul, and then it has to be burnt.
That's zu achar zu, right?
Yeah. Let's see Rashi on that.
Before it becomes kaddish.
Rashi says, V'kitchela, Rishoina kitcha is a makam. The first one is Mekadesh the Makam, Ukeshenichnas Achroin Sham Loy Nifsala B'Yoitze. When the second one comes in, so therefore he's cleared out the territory, so to speak, and he's not Pasul B'Yoitze. Shaloi Avra B'Makam Chol Ela B'Makam Mekudesh. He only has walked in a holy area, not in a chol area. So it seems to imply that the first one it's not that way. In other words, the first one seems to, obviously, it is abutted. It's true. It's kind of like, how does this work exactly? The first one, is it like, sending out beams so that it's like transforming any land right in front of it into kodesh? Or no, is it like at the same time, it's touching chol, but transforming it into kodesh? Seems to be that's what's going on. So it actually does become pasul. And that's why you have to burn it. All right.
Yeah, but you eat part of it.
You eat the inner one. You don't eat the outer one.
Oh,
sorry.
The outer one's the one that touches the...
Correct. And it becomes pasul through yoitze. Okay. So that's fine. Elamando Amar Zu Keneged Zu, but according to the one who says one was in front of the other, Travayu Bahadi Hadari Kamikache. Hold on a second. We got a problem because both of them are touching the chol at the same time. If they're going next to each other, should be then that both of them should be burnt, right? So the Gemara says, so the Gemara says, hold on a second. If you're already being so particular, is it true, even according to the one who says that we're going, this one goes in front of that one, Chadami Mikacha? How can it be that only one is Mekadesh the Azara? Whereas what did you say? Bishlam, according to the Manda Amar, that says one is going in front of the other. That's very good. The first one is Mekadesh. The second one goes into good liberated territory. But according to the one that says both of them are going, it's very good. Then it's problematic. The Gemara says, and it's not problematic if one is going first. According to the one that one is in front of the other, it means that only one is doing the Mekadesh. One is being Mekadesh the new territory, right? But it says in the Mishnah, Ha kol shaloi nasa b'chol elu tnan. It says in the Mishnah, it's got to be done with all of these, meaning you require what? You require both, right? You need all of it. And even according, we're going to learn that there's machlokas on how to read that line. When it says, Kol shelo nases bichol elu, so there's a manda omer, just in the next omud, who's going to say it means be'achas mikol elu, with one of these things. But even according to that Manda Amr, it says one of these things, meaning you don't need the Melech and the Navi and the Urim V'Tumim. You need Melech or Navi or Urim, right? Even according to him, Hani Travayu Chada Mitzvahi, but the two loaves are one unit, so you never need only one loaf. Doesn't mean one of these means one loaf. You need both loaves. So how do you explain that? So that doesn't make sense. Ella Rabbi Yochanan al pinavi necheles v'al pinavi nisrefes. What it means is you were trying to figure out a svara, why it is that one is consumed and one is burnt. And you were trying to think that the first one, which was touching the chol, became burnt because it was yotzei, and the other one wasn't yotzei. No, there's no svara. It's al pinavi. Remember, when the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, they were doing this. Who was telling them to do this? They were Nevi'im over there. So they got a beam from Hashem, a communication, and he told them what to do. So there's no svara to this. It's just this is the way it is. So therefore, stop thinking of svaras. It's just that one had to be consumed and one had to be burnt. Let's see Rashi at the top. Alpinavi, Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi. There were 3 Nevi'im at that time. Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi. V'hayusham al pihem beruach hakodesh asu. They did it al pi ruach hakodesh ve'ein tam bedavar. There's no reasoning to this issue. Stop trying to figure it out to say b'shlama this, but that. No. There was only one. So therefore, you could go either way. We don't know how they were set up. It was either set up buzu achar zu, or it was set up zu keneged zu. Either one is valid. Don't ask kashas. Okay. Gemara says, "Kedei." Don't ask any kashas right now. Kol shaloi nasis b'chol elu. It says in the Mishnah, anybody if it wasn't done with all of these things, itmar. So we have machlokas amaroim Rav Huna Amar. Rav Huna says b'chol elu tnan. It means with all of these things. Literally, you need all of them. You need the melech, you need the navi, you need the Sanhedrin, you need the Urim V'Tumim. Rav Nachman Amar be'achas mikol elu tnan. One of these things. Okay, so let's see. Now Rav Huna Amar b'chol elu tnan. Rav Huna says. B'chol elu tanan, with all of these things. So what does he think? So he thinks kasavar kedusha rishoina kidsha l'shata v'kidsha le'asid lavoi. So he says like this: the original kedusha of the Beis Hamikdash of Shlomo HaMelech. Okay, so when it was mikadesh for that time and for all time. Kidsha le'asid lavoi. Okay. The Ezra Zecher Ba'alma Hu David, and all that Ezra did was a Zecher Ba'alma. And Ezra wasn't really Mikadesh new ground. All he was doing was simply a Zecher Ba'alma, was some way of commemorating or recognizing in a type of in this very dramatic form, okay, of the procession about how they were Mekadosh it originally. Okay, let's see Rashi on that. How do we know that according to Rav Huna it means the B'chol Elu means Kitshel L'Shat v'Kitshel Le'ati Lavoi. So Rashi says, Kaloimer, V'im Yishum Kiddush Ezra Davai B'Bayis Sheni B'loi Melech U'B'loi Urim V'Tumim.
But that's different. Anyways, because we're talking about Bayis Sheni, but he's talking about like expanding the courtyard. Right, you're talking about bringing. We've been
bringing our the whole precedent for this whole parade comes from Ezra and Nehemiah when they established Beit Sheni.
I thought it was like to expand the actual courtyard. Like you need more. You're expanding that. You're saying that's not what it is.
Well, remember when they came, the day Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. So they were, I guess, delineating the Beis Hamikdash once again. So let's take a look here. So if, in other words, your kasha v'im mishum kiddush Ezra dahaviyai b'ayit sheni b'loi melech u'b'loi urim v'durba. Is that? Hold on a second. Rav Huna is saying like this: B'chol elu tnan. What do you mean you need melech? You need urim v'tumim? Then where did you bring this precedent from? Ezra and Nehemiah. But they didn't have a melech, and they didn't have an Urim Tumim, and they still did it because we didn't have an Urim Tumim at the beginning of the Bais Sheni. Damrim b'sechas yoyma chamisha dvarim chaser b'mikdash Sheni. There were 5 things that were missing in Mikdash Sheni: Eish, the fire from heaven; Shechina's presence; Aron, the Aron HaKodesh; Urim v'Tumim, Ruach HaKodesh, the Urim v'Tumim, the breastplate, and the Ruach HaKodesh. So Kasavar Kedusha Rishon of David v'Shlomo loy batla. So he's of the opinion the Kedusha Rishon of David and Shlomo was never batla. It's a good Kedusha. It was Mekadesh that area for all time. V'lohutzach Ezra Kadesh. Ezra didn't really need to be Mekadesh anything. Klomar Shehu loy hoisif klum ba'oirach v'roichev. In other words, he didn't add anything. Okay,
he wasn't. It wasn't Taisif. He wasn't
right. Umayde Kaddish, Kedichsiv, okay, Lezecher Ba'alma. He did it only Lezecher Ba'alma. Okay. Now, so let's go back to the Gemara. Rav Nachman Omer Be'achas Mikol Elu Tnan. Rav Nachman is of the opinion that it's one of these that's mentioned. Any one of these. You don't need all of them. So he obviously holds Kedusha Rishona Kitchel Shatav Aloy Kitchel Asid Lavoy. He's particular. No, you need one of these things because Ezra didn't have the Urim V'Tumim. Okay, didn't have the Urim V'Tumim. Did they have Melech? Did they have Melech? Yeah, I guess they might have. Maybe not at that time yet. But in any case,
they went to Zvugim. Didn't they start with Zvugim?
You're thinking about the
Bayashini wasn't.
That's not Melech. That was the those were the Chachamim. The Zugim were the Chachamim. Right. That wasn't a Melech thing. They didn't have a Melech when they came to Bayit Sheni, I guess. Later they'll have a Melech. But okay. In any case, Rav Nachman says it's one of these things. That original Kedusha lasted only for its time and not for the future. The Ezra, in fact, was Kedusha Kaddish, and he actually had to be Mekadesh that space. Afagav Deloy Havu Urim V'Tumim, even though there was no Urim V'Tumim. Okay. So Eisvei Rav Rav Nachman. So Rav asks the kasha to Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman is the one who says that it was Achas Mikol Elu. The Gemara, the Mishnah says Kol Shaloi Nases Bichol Elu. How can you say it means Achas Mi Elu when it says Bichol Elu? It says in the Mishnah, if you anybody who does this without all of these things. So he answers, Tani, no, read it as follows. Be'achas mikol elu. Either amend it or read it as follows. One of these things. That's not hard. Kol shana, unless bichol elu means be'achas mikol elu. Fine. Okay, it's not a kasha. Tashma. So we have another brisa. Abba shol oimer. Okay, so there's another kasha from this brisa. Abba Oshol says like this. Shnei bitzoin oyu bar mishcha. There were two marshes in the Har Hazesim. Okay, does everybody know where Har Hazesim is? It's on the eastern side of Yerushalayim, facing the eastern side of the Har Habayit. Exactly the opposite. When you're in the Kaisel, it's completely on the other side, and then there's a mountain, Har Hazesim. Fine. Tachtoina ve'elyoina. So it was a lower marsh and an upper marsh. Tachtoina niskadja b'chol elu. The lower marsh was actually niskadish. They actually included it into the precincts of the Beis HaMikdash by building a wall around it. I guess they drained it out first. And you think the Israeli pioneers were the first one to drain the marshes. Everything comes from the Gemara. Okay, no, it was drained out here. Ve'elyoina, so it says, the upper one was not miskadesh with all of these things. But rather, how is it mikadesh? When the oile goyla came in, the people that came up from the Gullus, they came in shaloi b'melech v'shaloi b'urim. They were mikadesh it without the melech, without the urim v'tumim. Now, so we have these two areas, these two marshes. All right, Rashi says, by the way, what does it mean that? Let's just see. Tachtoina niskaja b'chol elu shemiyemei bayis rishon ichnisua. From the time it was niskadish b'chol elu, it was niskadish for all of these things. Because already from the time of bayis rishon, they had brought it into the precincts of the Beis HaMikdash. V'chibru le'ir al yedei chayma acheres. They'd already put in a new wall around that lower marsh. So basically, the Abba Shaul is telling us that the lower marsh had been niskadish already from the time of bayis rishon. But the other one, they added on to the city. They built another wall beyond that. That one wasn't done, okay, with Bechol Elu, with all of these things. Now the bottom one, which its Kedusha was Gemura, that means it was a complete Kedusha. It was done with Bechol Elu, right? So then Amei Aretz Dichnasim L'Sham V'Oichlim Sham Kodshim Kalim. The Amei Aretz would go in there and they would eat Kodshim Kalim. Now they're allowed to eat Kodshim Kalim there because you're allowed to eat, what's a Kodshim Kal? That's like Shlamim, that's like a Toida, that's like, okay, so these are things that are called Kodshim Kalim, light Kodshim, as opposed to Kodshim, which is a Chatas, for example, would have to be eaten by the Kohanim. okay, in a more restricted area. But kachim kalim could be eaten anywhere that was niskadesh, any that has the kedusha of the Beis Hamikdash, so to speak. Okay, so they were able to eat kachim kalim, avaloi meiser sheni, but they would not eat meiser sheni, which doesn't make any sense because meiser sheni is more kal than kachim kalim. Meiser sheni just needs to be in the choimus of Yerushalayim, but they wouldn't eat it over there. All right, we'll have to see why. We'll get back to that in a second. The chaverim, what does it mean chaverim? Anybody know?
Friends.
Nope.
Those guys who fix your car, you know?
What?
Those guys who help you fix
Yeah, nice guys, you know. They wear the chai with lots of hair coming out, you know. There's the shirt off. That's not what a chaver is. A chaver means talmidei chachamim. It means people, true friends, which are talmidei chachamim who would keep to a higher level of kedusha and tahara. So oichlin sham kodshim kalim umaiser sheni. Now they would eat both. They would also eat meiser sheni. What do you mean? Hold on. The Amei Aretz were more strict than them about meiser sheni. We'll see why they were, and it gets to the guts of what an Amei Aretz is. We'll see in a second. And unfortunately, we can all go like this when we hear it. But okay, but we'll see. But what about the Elyoina Shaloi Haisa Kedusha Gemura? The Elyoina who didn't have Kedusha Gemura. Remember, it was the Oile Regalim that were Mekadosh it. Amei Aretz Nichnasim Sham. They would go in there. V'oichlim Sham Kodshim Kalim. They would eat kachim kalim, avaloi meiser sheni. Again, same thing. They would eat kachim kalim, but not meiser sheni. The chaverim, but the talmidei chachamim ain't oichlim sham loy kachim kalim v'loy meiser sheni.
They wouldn't eat either.
Here they were more strict. Here they wouldn't eat either. Now, why?
In the place that wasn't Gemara, that was a complete...
The upper marsh.
Right.
Called it the upper marsh, right? Why weren't they Mekadesh the upper marsh area? Why wasn't it Mekudesh? She'en moisif ala ir ve'ala azaras ela b'melech v'navi v'urim v'tumim v'sanhedrin shel ayin aleph u'b'shtei toidus u'b'shir. Because you're only moisif if you have all of these things. You have to have all of these things. So then why are Mekadosh it? So the Gemara says, what do you mean? I just said they weren't Mekadosh it. Lama Kitshua, Marta Loy Kitshua. You just said they weren't Mekadosh it. What do you mean Lama Kitshua? No, Ella, Lama Hichnisua. So then when they bring it into the city, why they enclose it into the city? That was the weak spot of Yerushalayim from a strategic military point of view. That was a weak area. Misham. And it was easy to actually be conquered from that area. So that's why they enclosed it by a wall. But they weren't Mekadosh. What do you see from here? What do you see from this brisa?
You need all three.
You need all of them. Okay, now let's explain just exactly with the Amei Aretz. What were they thinking? So the Amei Aretz, he goes to the shiur and he listens to the Rav and he listens. He gets very impressed by psukim, okay, and by the emotional inspiration. So let's see Rashi. He explains it very nice. Yesh the Farsh, the Amei Aretz hamafrishin maisrois. So we know that Amei Aretz who would separate the meiser hayuzrizim lasois by mitzvah min muvchar. We're talking about meiser sheni right now. They were very zaris to do this very, very carefully. They want to do the best mitzvah. Lefisha yushoimim drasha. They listened to the drasha that said aser bishvil shatis aser. It says, where is this? That Gemara aser bishvil shatis aser? That's in. The pasuk says aser ta aser is called tfua zaracha hayoytze asadeh shana shana. Right? It says that. That's in Dvarim Yudal. It's talking about how you have to take meiser from your tfua every year. Okay. Then it says you have to eat it, consume it in front of Hashem, in the presence of Hashem, b'makam asher yivchar, where he'll choose to rest his shechina sham. Meiser the gancha, and it goes through. So number one, it says aser to aser. There's a drasha. Aser bishvil shetis asher. Take meiser so you'll become rich, right? They say that's the only place where Hashem tests people. He says, go ahead, try bachanuni gam bezos. Try testing me with this one. Take off meiser. It says, so it's implied in the pasuk. Aser tis asher. Tis aser means you take off Meiser, so drasha is tis asher, not tis, right? Not from aser tis aser from tithe, but tis asher, you'll become wealthy. Aser kedei tis asher, you'll take off a tithe so you'll become wealthy. Oh, they like that.
Let me try.
They were like, yeah, I want to become wealthy. Okay, fine. Also, in Meiser Sheni, you have to do vidui. Sisi kol asher tzivisani, right? You ever heard that one? You have to do vidui Meiser. You have to confess over the Meiser after every few years, and you have to say, I did all that you commanded me to do. I separated out the Gemara. It's in the Psukim in Parshas Kisava, right? You do, is it Kisava? No. It's, but you have to do Vidui Meiser, okay? So, yeah, sorry, it's Devarim Chavav, yeah. So, again, it was public. They had to go ahead and confess. Very dramatic, okay? So they didn't want to be like, I didn't do it. So they're into it, right? And they would listen to the metargamim, those who would translate the pasuk. The pasuk was v'chalti lifnei Hashem Elokecha meiser deganach v'tiroishcha v'yitzarecha. You will eat in the presence of Hashem meiser of your dagan, your grains. Tiroish is your oil. V'yitzar is your grapes. And therefore they would hear it. L'kacha yu nichnasim atoy choymes Yerushalayim apnimis. So they heard that it says Lifnei Hashem Elokecha, and they heard that you become wealthy, and they had to make vidui. So they were very frum about it. So they went into into as close as they could into the Har Habayis to eat their meiser, okay, to eat their meiser sheni, right? Because they wanted to do it really well. Aval bekutshim, but by kutshim, loy matrichim atzmam. They wouldn't exert themselves too much. They would eat it in the, let's call it the extra places, the Marsh 1 and Marsh 2. They couldn't find a place to stay and eat it inside the original walls of Yerushalayim. They would go into the ancillary places. And when they would tell people, would say, listen, hold on a second. Marsh 1, that's Kaddish, but Marsh 2, the one up the hill, that's not Kaddish. So they say, Lo Yusha, they wouldn't listen to them. They would say, what are you talking about? It's exactly the same. This one's enclosed by a wall, and that one's enclosed by a wall, right? Mali tachtoina, mali oiloina. They're exactly the same. Okay, so here you see how the human mind works. Okay, it's very impressed by drushes and this and that, and doesn't always pay attention to the details, the slight details of halacha. And I think we all get afflicted by that sometimes. Okay, all right. So, but now, in other words, what's the pshat in Amaretz?
They did it for themselves. The thing that benefited themselves, they were machmir with.
You mean what they felt?
I get money out of this.
Money, or it's wow, it made an impression. Lifnei Hashem. What a good drasha the rabbi gave, and look what I'll get out of it, right?
And even the things you connect to.
And these are and it's Lifnei Hashem. What?
Very
selective, right.
Selective listening.
Selective.
So here you have in the Gemara the stark difference. But whereas the Talmud Chacham in one area he was makel, he was more lenient than the Amaretz, and the other he would be more stringent. Why? Because he's following the halacha, that's the whole point. When you follow halacha, you know where to be makel and where to be machmir. Okay. So anyway, so we see from here it has to be b'chol elu. Why? Right? That's what it says. That's why the upper marsh had never been fully sanctified. Where are we doing for time? How are we? 47. 44, okay. Yeah. Okay, so Gemara says Tanai, it's a machloikas Tanai. The Tanya Amar, Rabbi Eliezer Shamati Kishu Boinim Behechal. So Rabbi Eliezer says like this: I heard that when they used to build in the Heichal, that's in the actual building of the Beit HaMikdash, asu kloim laheichal. The kloim lazars. When they used to build in the Heichal, they used to make kloim is like canvas or walls. Okay, they would put up. I don't know if it was canvas or whatever it was. It was fabric, walls of fabric. Okay, for the Heichal and walls of fabric for the Azaris. Okay, so what are we talking about? Rashi says, B'yamei Ezra. In other words, when they used to build, I guess they were building, in the times of Ezra, they were building the Beis Hamikdash. So, right? Because it was completely destroyed. So they were rebuilding it. So as they were building the Heichal, okay, so they would make climb, they would delineate the where the walls would be, and they would put up these curtains, so to speak. Okay? And they did the same thing for the Azaras. Except they put up this partition, this cloth partition, and they would build the bricks on the outside of it for the Heichal. But for the Azaras, they would build it on the inside of the cloth partitions, right? Why? Because they didn't want people to be looking in the inside of the Heichal. All right? They wanted people to be outside. So they put up the cloth partition, I guess a little bit and then they would pull it in a little bit, and then they would build on the outside, so you wouldn't be looking in. The Azaras, it didn't matter as much. Amr Yeshua Shamati, and the Rabbi Yeshua said, Shamati Shemakrivin Afal Pisha Ein Base in bias. Oh, so Rabbi Yeshua said, I heard that they actually used to bring korbanos even though there was no actually fixed building. They just had the place. Oichlin Kodshe Kodshim, they would eat the Holy of Holies. They would eat the highest level of korban, like a korban, right? Korban chatas, etc. Afal Pisha Kloim, even if there were no curtains. Kodshim Kalim and Meiser Sheni Afal Pisha Choima. Kodshim Kalim and Meiser Sheni, even though there was no choma. Mipnei Shekadusha Rishayna Kitcha L'Shata v'Kitcha L'Asid Lava. Because as we said before, the Kedusha Rishayna, that of the time of David HaMelech, stayed. It continued on for all time. So what do you see from here? That's the same position as Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman earlier says, Be'achas mikol elu. Remember, we didn't require all of the things of the Mishnah. Right. Melech, Sanhedrin, Navi, right? Why? Because it was anyway sanctified, and all they were doing, it was a Zecher Ba'alma. So here you see that even though we just had a brisa that said they didn't have all of these things in order to be Mekadosh the upper marsh area, but this one says very clearly that it was Mekudesh for all time. You see from here.
So they had the Sanhedrin. Abai Sheni had the Sanhedrin.
Well, they didn't need to be Mekadosh anything.
No, but so then what?
They only did it as a Zecher Ba'alma.
Right, but then that's not explaining why we have all three. Like it's saying you don't have to have any of them. It's not saying you have to have one of them. You're saying you're now saying
you need something. You need something in order to create the parade.
One of the three.
Yeah.
So that they have the Sanhedrin because they didn't have the Melech or the Navi.
Yeah, they did have the Sanhedrin, I think.
Yeah.
Sure.
So
yeah. Okay. So Gemara says, Lav Michal de Rebbe Eliezer Savar Loy Kitchel Asid Lavoy. Does this not imply that Rebbe Eliezer? Oh, because Rebbe Eliezer said. So there was two Tanoim in this brisa. He had Rabbi Yeshua who said that they were all allowed to be makriv without any of these partitions. You didn't need any of them. Because the land had already been sanctified. Okay, so that's Rabbi Yeshua. Doesn't that imply that Rabbi Eliezer, who says that they would have to put up partitions, etc., that he holds loy kitchel asid lavoy? Doesn't that imply that he says that it wasn't mekudesh for all time? That's why they had to put up the partitions. Okay. So he says, Amarle Ravina Ravashi. So Ravina says to Ravashi, Mimai, how do you know that? Why would you conclude that? Maybe they all hold, meaning even Rebbe Eliezer holds that it was sanctified for all time. And this rabbi, he's just telling over what he heard happened. Umar Mardashmiya Le Kamar, and the other one is telling over what he heard. V'chitema kloim l'Rebbe Eliezer lamali. So what do you need kloim if you don't need it to re-sanctify the space? What do you need it for if it's kedusha rishon if the kedusha was there? So tzniusa b'alma was tzniusa b'alma. On this one, let's see Rashi on tzniusa b'alma. Did he say anything? No, so that was the tznius abalmas that I was mentioning before, that they wouldn't peer in into the heichal. By the way, it's interesting over here. You see, you don't need the Beis Hamikdash standing in order to bring the korbanos. Don't we have some people that every year they try to do that?
Is that right?
They probably rely on this Gemara. You can't paskin from a Gemara just straight out. Like you need to have.
Right.
The Chachamim, you have to have the Chachamim agreeing with you. What?
But technically, also, if we build the Sanhedrin, if we create a Sanhedrin, we could start building the Beis Hamikdash.
Well, it's kind of occupied right now, isn't it? How do you build it?
Right. No, but I'm saying
If it weren't there? Yeah, I suppose so.
we could just
Sure.
build a Sanhedrin.
Yeah. Okay, so what do you see from here? We don't see a machlokas tanaim. Actually, the Gemara says perhaps both of these tanoim in this brisa work with a position that that it was kedusha rishona kitchel ashad v'kitchel la'asid la'avoy for all time, and it would be achas mikol elu. It would be any of these things would be okay to sanctify. Elahani tonight. So no, let's look here in the following brisa. That's what we'll see in machlokas tonight. The Tanya, Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yosi. Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yosi said, "Lama manu chachamim es elu." Now, what are we talking about? We're talking about a Mishnah. Okay, it's in the last parak of Erechim. Okay, and in that Mishnah, it counts a number of cities. It names a number of cities. Okay, that were walled cities from the times of Yeshua ben Nun. I think 8 of them. It names 8 cities. And for what inyan? Inyan mitzvahs bate arichoima. So there's a mitzvah like this, bate arichoima. It's in Sefer Devarim. The mitzvah goes like this, that if a person buys a house or dwelling in a walled city, all right, the owner has 1 year to redeem it. There's this concept of redeeming the land that you sold. We don't have that concept. We don't have a connection to land and property the way it is in Eretz Yisrael. But in Eretz Yisrael, like it was a big deal if you sold, for example, your property, that you had a chance to redeem it. Excuse me. I guess the idea was nobody sold property. The only reason you would sell property is because you needed cash, right? So if you sell your dwelling in an ear which is surrounded by walls, right? So you were given 1 year to redeem it. After the 1 year, if the seller didn't redeem it, then it was called nechlat. It was fully sold to the buyer. It's not the case if it was an unwalled city or if it was land. And land, if you don't redeem it, then ultimately it still goes back to the original owner after the Yovel, right? Yeah, okay. But that's not the case with Batei Arichoma, it's forever, okay? So they counted 8 cities that had this quality, which were that they were walled from the time of Yeshua ben Nun. So the Gemara asks like this. Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yosi. So why did the Chachamim count these cities? Because we know there were many other cities. There were about 60 walled cities in the time of Yeshua ben Nun. Yeah. 60, you didn't realize that, right? It's a lot, right? You know why? Because when the Bnei Agoyla came back from Bavel, they found these cities and they were Mekadosh them. Okay? Now Rashi says, V'loi pirishli b'mem mekudashim are Eretz Yisrael. I don't know, Rashi says. Interesting. Pretty seldom does Rashi says, I'm not sure, or here he says, Loi pirishli, nobody explained to me exactly, it's never been explained to me how they sanctified the cities of Eretz Yisrael. So he says they found these cities and they were Mekadosh them. Rashi says, I'm not sure what the process was, but they were Mekadosh them. Avarishoinois batlu. But the other ones, the other 52 or whatever, they were batal. Misha Batla Aretz, once the land had been, had been destroyed in the Gullus of Bavel, right? Alma Kasava Kedusha Rishon and Kitchel Ashat V'Loi Kitchel Asid Lavai. So you see from this Manda Amar Rabbi Shmuel that the Kedusha, the original Kedusha, did not last forever because you see they actually had to go back and re-sanctify these walled cities so they had the quality of a walled city. Raminu, but yet we have a steer with another brisa. So Amar Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yosi, another Amar Rabbi Yishmael. V'chi elu bilvad hayu. Was it only these ones? We'll go to the bottom of the Amid. It won't take very long, okay? It will take 2 minutes. Okay, was it only these ones? V'aloi kvar nemar shishim ir kol chelvel argoiv mamleches oig bebashan. What do you mean? Was it only these ones? There's another brisa that mirrors this Mishnah and says, was it only these 8 cities? But we know there were 60 cities. The pasuk in Yeshua says, kol chevel argov, the whole strip, the Argov strip, Mamleches Og, Bebashan, Kol Eila, Arim, Betzuras, all of these had were fortified cities. Choim Gvoya, very tall walls. Elalama Manu Chachamim is Elu. So why the Chachamim count these ones? Alu Bnei Goyla Matzu Elu, because when the Goyla came up, when the Bnei Goyla came up, they found these, the Kitchum, and they were sanctified them. Kitchum? Hasha Amrina Lekaman Deloitte Tzricha Lekadushe. What are you talking about? You're going to tell me in a moment. We haven't seen it yet. The Bryce is going to tell me in a moment. They didn't need to be Mekadosh them. Elamatsu elu uminoum. It doesn't mean that they were Mekadosh. It just says they found these. These were the ones they found. So they wrote them in the Mishnah. But there were others. Veloy elu bilvad ella. Oh, so the Mishnah goes, the Bryce goes on and says, and not only these ones alone have the Kedusha of a walled city. Any city where you have a masorah, a tradition, Yeshua ben Nun, that it was walled from the time of Yeshua ben Nun. Kol mitzvahs elu noyegos boy. All the mitzvahs of a walled city apply to it. Mipnei shekadusha rishoina kitcha leshata v'kitcha le'asid lavoy, because the kedusha remains forever. So according to this brisa, the reason why they put in those 8 is not because they sanctified them, but they found them. So they were the ones that they found first. We have a stira now, Kasha de Rabbi Yishmael. So here you have 2 brises. You definitely have machloikis on the question of kedusha rishon and kitchel ashid lavoy, and that mirrors a machloik that we said before between Rav Nachman and Rav. Who was it? Rav Nachman and Rav Huna. Okay. So now, the Gemara just cleans up this, the last thing, because both brises are attributed to Rabbi Yishmael b'Rabbi Yosi. It's a stira. Kasha de Rabbi Yishmael b'Rabbi Yosi ad Rabbi Yishmael b'Rabbi Yosi. So we have 2 terutzim to that. Ibai say mitrei tanoia liba de Rabbi Yishmael. Either we have 2 tanoim that are quoting an earlier tradition of Rabbi Yishmael b'Rabbi Yosi. Ibai say machadem minaya Rabbi Eliezer b'Rabbi Yosi amra. Alternatively, one of them is actually in the name of Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yosi, and it got mixed up over time to attribute it to Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yosi. It's really Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yosi, different person. The Tanya Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yosi Oimer, because he made a drasha. The pasuk says Asher Loi Chayma, city that Loi Chayma. Now, how do you say has in Hebrew? Loi, to him, Lamed Vav, but it's written with an aleph. Lamed Vav Aleph, which means that doesn't have a chayma. So it does it or doesn't. So the Gemara says, Af she'ein lo chayma achshav vayalo koydem lachem. Even though it doesn't have a wall now, as long as it had a wall at the time of Yeshua ben Nun, it qualifies. The pasuk is implying loy has, loy with an aleph means doesn't have to have now. Whose position is that? That's the position of Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yosi, that because Kedusha Rishoina is for all time. So that would be that right. So we'll stop there. Okay?
I don't think it's an argument. I think Rabbi Nachman's talking about to re-sanctify, you don't need. And Rav Huna is talking about if you're going to add on to what has not been sanctified, that you need all 3. Even the example of and you see it. That's why the Haradayas, right? They reject the Chachamim reject the upper. Because it doesn't add.
Wi-Fi
But anything that
up.
was used before
New batteries
is
over
fine.
there.
That was the whole point. So they're not arguing.
They are arguing.
No, Reb Nachman is talking about
No. But the Gemara doesn't explain that. If it was as simple as that, the Gemara would have said it. They're talking about 2 different things. The Gemara is talking about whether in the sanctification process is really a sanctification process. According to Reb Nachman, who says that B'chol elu, you need it to do it again.
Right.
And Rav Huna says you don't need to do it again.
I thought, but they use the other areas. Think about it. They still ate kachim. They still the Talmid Chachamim still ate kachim. They still
Those had been sanctified in Bais Rishon.
right. That's what I'm saying.
Bais Rishon, you had everything.
That's,
Oh wow! I get a
This is for you. As a thank you for stepping up and always helping us out.
I was going to say, I do it every Sunday morning. It gets me out of bed.
Is that right?
Great.
Okay, it's good to know. It's good to know. Shoya, thank you
Unless
so
I'm not
much.
here. But
Thank you so much.
I heard somebody told me, I said,
Yeah.
don't put this on.